I moved into my dorm on a Tuesday, which felt wrong somehow. Everyone always moves in on a weekend in movies, with parents crying and confetti and some upbeat song playing. I moved in on a Tuesday afternoon with my mom's Honda packed too full and a resident advisor named Priya checking my name off a list like I was cattle. My roommate's situation had fallen through 2 days before. The guy I was supposed to live with, some kid named Marcus from Ohio, had decided at the last minute to go to a different school, and housing stuck me in a triple that had somehow become a double with a guy who'd already been living there a full year. Older than me. A junior named Theo who I'd never met, never talked to, knew nothing about except his name on a printout. I want to tell you that I walked in and there was some cinematic moment. There wasn't, he wasn't even there. Just a bed already made, posters already up, some indie band I didn't recognize, a national parks map with pins in it, a photo of him and what I assumed were his parents at what looked like a lake. Normal stuff, nothing that told me anything except that he clearly had a whole life before I showed up in it, which obviously everyone had, but it hit me weird that day. Like I was the guest in someone else's story. I didn't meet him until almost 11 that night. I was already in bed, not asleep, just lying there with my phone too close to my face when the door opened and a guy walked in wearing a hoodie that said something about a summer camp, holding a plate of what looked like leftover pasta. "Oh hey," he said, stopping in the doorway like he'd forgotten I existed. "You're the guy." "I'm the guy," I said. "Sorry, that's weird. I mean, hi, I'm Theo." "Eli." "Eli," he nodded like he was filing it away. "Sorry I wasn't around earlier, I had a shift." That was it, that was the whole first conversation. He climbed into his bed, put his earbuds in, and that was that. I remember being a little disappointed, honestly, in a way I didn't examine too closely. I told myself it was just because I wanted a roommate who talked to me because I didn't know anyone yet, because I was homesick already and it was only day one. For the first couple of weeks, that's basically all it was. Polite, a little distant. He worked a lot, some job at a coffee place off campus, and he had his own friends, his own rhythm, and I had orientation events and awkward dining hall conversations and a class schedule that felt like it belonged to someone smarter than me. We said good morning. We said good night. Sometimes he'd ask how a class went and actually seem like he wanted to know the answer, which surprised me every time. I don't think I can explain what was going on with me back then without sounding dramatic, so I'm just going to say it plainly. I'd known I was gay since I was maybe 14. I hadn't told anyone except one friend from high school over text at 1 in the morning and then never brought it up again, like if I didn't mention it, it would stay small and manageable. My parents didn't know. My dad especially, I'd heard him make comments before, not even about me, just about other people, the kind of comments that make you file information away for later use like a warning label. So I'd built this whole separate room in my head where that part of me lived, and I kept the door shut, and college was supposed to be where I finally got to open it. Except I didn't. I got there and I just kept the door shut out of habit. The night everything changed, starting with a phone call, not a party, not a class, nothing that sounds like the beginning of a love story. My dad called because my mom told him I'd joined some club, nothing serious, just a film club, and somehow in the way conversations with my dad tended to go sideways, it turned into him asking who I was hanging out with and then into him saying something about not turning into one of those college kids, and I knew exactly what he meant even though he never said the actual words. He never says the actual words, that's almost worse. I hung up and sat on the edge of my bed, and I don't really know how to describe what happened next except that my chest did this thing where it felt like someone had reached in and squeezed. I've had panic before a few times, but never like that, never in a place that wasn't my own room at home where I could just lie on the floor until it passed. I was gripping the edge of the mattress with both hands like I was going to fall off something, breathing in these short pulls that weren't doing anything, and I remember thinking distantly, almost like a spectator, that I should probably lie down, and then the door opened. Theo walked in holding his backpack and his coffee apron still half on, and he stopped the second he saw me. I wanted to disappear. I actually remember that thought clearly, not embarrassment exactly, more like a physical wish to not exist in that room in that moment, in front of a guy I barely knew, having whatever this was happening on the bed like a scene from something. "Hey," he said, and his voice was different than I'd heard it before. Not alarmed, not that fake calm voice people do, just quiet. "Hey, I'm right here." He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't say, "Are you okay?" Which I've since learned is a question that never helps anyone in that state because the answer is obviously no, and now you have to say it out loud. He just came over, set his stuff down slowly like he didn't want to startle me, and sat on the floor in front of me, not touching me, just there. "You don't have to talk," he said, "I'm just gonna sit here." I don't know how long it took, longer than I wanted it to. My breathing came back eventually in that ragged, exhausted way like I'd run somewhere. He got up at some point and came back with a glass of water from the sink in the hallway bathroom and just put it near my hand without making a thing of it. "Sorry," I said when I could talk again. My voice sounded wrecked. "Don't do that," he said, not sharp, just firm. "Do what?" "Apologize for it, you don't have to." I looked at him then, really looked, and he wasn't looking at me like I was something broken, which is what I expected, what I'd braced for. He just looked steady. Like this was a normal Tuesday for him, which I found out later it kind of was, because his younger sister had pretty bad anxiety and he'd grown up learning what to do and what not to do, which explained a lot, but I didn't know that yet. "Bad call with my dad," I said, because I felt like I owed him something, some explanation, even a small one. "You don't have to tell me anything," he said, "but I'm not going anywhere if you want to." I didn't tell him everything that night. I told him it was about my dad being controlling, which was true, just not the whole truth. But something had shifted and we both knew it, even if neither of us said it out loud. He stayed on the floor a long time after that, not talking much, just occasionally saying something small and unimportant, asking if I'd eaten, telling me a stupid story about a customer who'd yelled at him over oat milk, and I understood even then that he was doing it on purpose, giving me something normal to hold on to. That was the walking in, not dramatic, not what you'd think. He didn't see anything scandalous, nothing you'd expect from a title like that. He just saw me at my worst, unguarded, falling apart in the most unglamorous way a person can fall apart, and instead of making an excuse to leave, instead of the awkward retreat I'd have understood completely, he sat down on the floor of our dorm room and stayed. Things were different after that, though it took me a while to notice how different because it happened slowly, the way most real things happen. He started leaving his door well, our door cracked instead of shut when he got back from work, like he wanted me to feel like I could talk if I needed to. He started asking sometimes if I wanted to walk to the dining hall with him, and I always said yes, even the nights I wasn't hungry, because I wanted to be near him more than I wanted food. We didn't talk about what happened that night again for a couple of weeks. I think we both understood that it wasn't a door that got opened once and stayed open, it was something we were building slowly, brick by brick, without either of us nomming it. The thing that finally cracked it open more was, of all things, a stupid movie. It was a Friday, late October, cold enough that the heater in our room made this clicking noise all night that we started making fun of together. Giving it a name, Gerald, we called it, for no reason either of us could explain. Theo didn't have work that night, which was rare, and I didn't have anywhere to be, which was less rare, and he asked if I wanted to watch something on his laptop because the dorm Wi-Fi made streaming on my end basically impossible. We ended up on his bed, both leaning against the wall, laptop balanced on a pillow between us, watching some low-budget thing he swore was a classic, and I was pretty sure it was just something he liked because he'd seen it as a kid. Halfway through, our arms were touching. Neither of us moved away. I remember being so aware of that single point of contact that I couldn't focus on a word of dialogue in the movie. My whole nervous system apparently rerouted itself to the 3 inches of skin where his arm met mine. At some point he paused the movie to go get water, and when he came back he didn't sit exactly where he'd been sitting before. He sat a little closer. "You're not watching this," he said, not a question. "I'm watching it. You've been staring at the same spot on the wall for like 10 minutes. I felt my face go hot. I'm tired." He looked at me for a second too long, like he was deciding something. "Can I ask you something and you don't have to answer if you don't want to?" "Okay." "That night with your dad," he was picking at a loose thread on the blanket, not looking at me now. "Was that just about him being controlling, or was there more to it?" I don't know why that particular question, asked in that particular moment, with Gerald clicking away in the wall and some movie paused on a frozen frame of a guy mid-laugh, was the thing that finally did it. Maybe it was that he'd waited, that he hadn't asked right away, hadn't pushed, had let me have my own timing. "There's more to it," I said. He didn't say anything, just waited, giving me the space to keep going or not. "I'm gay," I said, and it came out so much smaller than I expected after years of building this whole fortress around 3 words. "My dad doesn't know, I don't think he'd take it well." The room was quiet for a second that felt very long. "Okay," Theo said, just that, then after a beat, "Thanks for telling me." "That's it, okay. What were you expecting?" "I don't know, something bigger." He smiled a little, and it wasn't a pitying smile, it was something warmer than that. "It doesn't have to be a bigger thing than it is. You told me something real about yourself, that's not nothing, but it doesn't have to become a whole production either unless you want it to." I laughed, actually laughed, this surprised, startled sound because it was such a strange, specific kind of relief. To say the thing and have it just be received, not made into a moment, not turned into a discussion about identity or a checklist of follow-up questions. Just received. "Can I tell you something too?" he said, and something in his voice had changed, gotten careful. "Yeah. I'm not straight either, I don't really use a label for it, I've never needed to, I guess, but yeah." I stared at him. A whole year of sharing a room with someone, and this fact had just been sitting there the entire time, folded up small, waiting for the right night to unfold. "You could have told me," I said, though I understood immediately, even as I said it, why he hadn't. "It's not that easy. It's never that easy, no matter how many people tell you it should be." "So could you," he said, not unkindly, and we both kind of laughed at that, a laugh that had relief woven all through it. We didn't kiss that night. I want to be honest about that because I think stories like this always jump straight from confession to kissing like there's no in-between, and that's not how it went for us. We just sat there, closer than before, and finished the movie, and something had changed in the room's air, something neither of us pointed to directly, but I went to sleep that night for the first time in weeks without that tight feeling in my chest. The weeks after that were the best weeks of my life up to that point, and I don't say that lightly. We started doing everything together, not in some overwhelming joined-at-the-hip way, but in a way that just felt natural, like our schedules had been quietly rearranging themselves around each other without either of us officially deciding to. He'd walk me to my Tuesday morning class even though it was in the opposite direction from his. I started coming by the coffee shop during his shifts, sitting in the corner with my laptop pretending to do homework, actually just watching him work, the easy way he talked to customers, the way he'd glance over at me between orders like he was checking I was still there. There was a night in November I thought about a lot. We'd gone out with a couple of his friends from the coffee shop, nothing big, just dinner at this cheap Thai place near campus. And on the walk back it had started raining, that cold late fall rain that soaks through everything in about 90 seconds. We ran the last 2 blocks laughing, both of us completely drenched by the time we got inside. And in the elevator up to our floor he looked at me, hair plastered down, cheeks red from the cold and the running, and said, "You look ridiculous," in this voice that made it sound like the nicest thing anyone had ever said to me. "You too," I said. "I know." The elevator doors opened, and neither of us moved for a second. "Eli," he said, and something about the way he said my name made my whole chest tighten, but a different kind of tightening than the panic kind. A good kind. A kind I didn't have a lot of practice with yet. "Yes. I really want to kiss you right now, and I've wanted to for like 3 weeks, and I don't know if that's a weird thing to just say in an elevator." I laughed, this nervous, happy sound. "It's a little weird." "Is that a no?" "It's not a no." He kissed me then, right there in the elevator, with the doors slowly starting to close and then bumping back open because we were standing in the sensor's way. Both of us laughing into it a little, which should have ruined the moment but somehow made it better, made it feel like us instead of like some scene we were performing. I'm not going to pretend everything was easy after that because it wasn't, and I think it's important to say that, because most of these stories end right at the kiss like that's the finish line, but for us it was really just the start of a much harder, much realer thing. Being together meant being careful in a way that neither of us had signed up for exactly but both understood. I wasn't out to my parents. He was out to his, had been for years. His family was one of those rare, easy ones, but he understood in a way that made me love him more that my situation wasn't his to push on. We were careful around certain people on our floor. We didn't hold hands walking to the dining hall on the days my roommates, sorry, my own family friend, a girl named Priya's cousin, who went to our school and had a habit of reporting things back to people who knew my parents, was around. It sounds exhausting written down like that, and some days it was. There was a fight in December, right before finals, that I still think about with a kind of ache. He wanted to post something for our 1-month anniversary. Nothing crazy, just a photo, no faces even, just our hands, and I panicked and told him no, and he got quiet in that way he did when he was hurt but trying not to show it. And I said something I regret, something like, "You don't get it because it's easy for you," which wasn't fair, wasn't true even, because nothing about coming out is easy for anyone. He just had it easier with his specific family. Which isn't the same thing as easy. He didn't yell, that wasn't his way. He just said, "Okay," and went quiet for 2 days, polite but distant, back to that early semester version of himself I'd almost forgotten, and it terrified me more than any fight with actual yelling could have. On the third night, I found him in the study lounge on our floor, alone, with a textbook open in front of him that he clearly wasn't reading. "Can I sit?" I said. He nodded, not looking up right away. "I'm sorry," I said. "What I said wasn't fair." "It's fine." "It's not fine, you've barely talked to me in 2 days." He closed the textbook slowly. "I know it's not easy for you, I do know that. Sometimes I forget that you're still figuring it out because when I'm with you it doesn't feel complicated. It feels like the easiest thing in the world. And then I get reminded that for you it's not that, and it stings a little, that's all. I'm not mad at you, I'm scared maybe, that you'll decide it's not worth the complicated parts." I felt something crack open in my chest hearing him say that because I hadn't even considered it from that angle, hadn't considered that my fear could look from the outside like doubt about him. "It's not that I don't want people to know," I said. "It's that I don't know how to lose my dad, and I think that's what would happen. I'm not scared of you finding out, I'm not sure. I'm scared of what happens after I tell the one person who could take everything away." He reached over and took my hand, right there in the empty study lounge, and didn't say anything for a while. "We'll go as slow as you need," he said finally. "I just needed you to tell me that instead of snapping at me, that's all I needed." "I'll do better. I know." We didn't fix everything that night, not in some magic instant way, but we started actually talking about it instead of around it, which changed things. He started asking before doing anything that might put me in a position I wasn't ready for. I started actually explaining my fear instead of just reacting defensively when it got triggered. It made the relationship feel less like a secret and more like a partnership, even while some of it still had to stay quiet. Spring semester brought a different kind of test, one I didn't see coming. Theo had an ex, a guy named Marcus, unrelated to my original ghost roommate. Funny coincidence, different Marcus, who'd been out of the picture for over a year but who resurfaced right around February, sliding back into Theo's social circle through a mutual friend's birthday party neither of us could really avoid. I'm not proud of how I handled it. I got quiet and weird the whole night, watching the two of them talk near the drinks table, watching how easy it looked, how they had a whole shared history I wasn't part of, inside jokes I couldn't follow, a comfort with each other that made something ugly and jealous twist in my stomach even though I trusted Theo, genuinely did. On the walk home, I finally said something, badly, the way you do when you've been stewing on it for hours instead of just saying it in the moment. "You guys seem close tonight." "We used to date, Eli. Of course we're close, we were together for like a year." "I know, I don't know, it's weird seeing it." He stopped walking. "Are you asking me something, or are you just going to be weird about it all night?" That stung, but it was fair. "I guess I'm asking if I have anything to worry about." He looked at me for a long moment and I watched something soften in his face, the irritation draining out of it. "No," he said, "you really don't. Marcus and I ended for good reasons and being around him tonight just reminded me why. You want to know something? The whole time I was talking to him I kept looking over to see where you were in the room. That's not something I ever did with him. I don't have to check where he is, I have to check where you are." I didn't have a response for that beyond just reaching for his hand right there on the sidewalk, not caring for once who might see. The rest of that spring is a blur of good things. Honestly, the kind of stretch where nothing dramatic happens and you don't appreciate it until much later, looking back, realizing that was the good part, that was the part you'd give anything to get back to. Late night walks around the quad. Him teaching me to cook the one dish he actually knew how to make well, some garlic pasta thing his grandmother taught him. Me finally slowly starting to tell a few close friends the truth about us, watching the sky not fall, watching most of them just say okay cool and move on with their lives, which was its own kind of revelation that the catastrophe I'd built up in my head for years was mostly just that, a thing built up in my head. The hardest part came in May, at the very end of the year, when I finally decided to tell my parents. I want to be clear that Theo didn't push me into this. If anything, he was the one telling me to wait, to be sure, to do it when I felt ready and not a day before. But something about watching him be so unafraid of his own life, so unashamed, made me tired of hiding mine. I drove home for a weekend specifically to do it, sat my parents down in the living room where I'd had 1,000 mundane conversations growing up and told them. My mom cried, but the good kind, mostly the kind that comes from relief and worry tangled together. My dad didn't say much of anything for almost a full minute, which felt like the longest minute of my entire life, long enough that I started rehearsing internally what I'd do if he told me to leave, where I'd go, whether Theo's family would take me in for the summer. "I don't understand it," my dad said finally, "but you're still my kid." It wasn't a movie moment. It wasn't him hugging me and telling me he loved me exactly as I was, no complications. It was smaller than that, messier, more real, a man clearly uncomfortable, clearly working through decades of assumptions in real time, landing on the one thing he could say honestly in that moment. It wasn't everything, but it was so much more than the nothing I'd braced myself for. I called Theo the second I got back to my car outside my parents' house, and I was crying, and he picked up on the first ring like he'd been waiting by the phone, which, he later admitted, he basically had been. "How'd it go?" he said, and I could hear him trying to sound calm, trying not to let his own nerves show through. He said he doesn't understand it, but I'm still his kid. There was a pause on the line, and then Theo let out this breath, this long exhale I could practically feel through the phone. "That's good, Eli, that's really good. It's not everything. It doesn't have to be everything today, it's a start. Starts are allowed to be small." I sat in my car in the driveway for a long time after we hung up, just looking at the house I grew up in, feeling lighter than I had in years, not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because the door I'd kept shut for so long was finally open, and nothing terrible had rushed in to destroy me the way I'd always feared it would. We're not in college anymore, Theo and I. It's been a few years now. I'm telling you the story from a kitchen that's actually ours, in an apartment with a heater that doesn't click the way Gerald used to, though we still joke about Gerald sometimes, like he's an old friend from a life we used to live. My dad still doesn't fully understand it in his own words, but he came to Thanksgiving last year and shook Theo's hand and asked him about his job and didn't flinch once, and for us that's enough. That's more than enough, actually. That's everything built slowly, the way real things get built. I think about that night on the bed a lot, not the kiss in the elevator, not the big confession, but that first night, the panic, the floor, the water glass, the way he just sat there and didn't make it a bigger thing than it needed to be. I think that's the moment that actually saved me long before either of us called it love. Not because he saw me falling apart, because he stayed anyway and made staying look like the easiest, most natural thing in the world. Sometimes the person who's supposed to walk away is the one who ends up staying the longest. And sometimes the worst moment of your life is actually the door swinging open on the best one if you're lucky enough to have someone standing there who doesn't flinch.